Stop us if you've heard this story before. Guy meets girl in New York City. They fall in love and decide over the Christmas holiday to go on a cross-country road trip to Los Angeles. Now, as you well know, the best way to find out if two people are going to get along is a cross-country road trip. But before they get even an hour and a half into the drive, out of the blue, the guy proposes in the middle of a snowstorm in a Chi-Chi's parking lot. She says yes, but from that moment, for the next 7 days, neither of them brings it up again. It was as if it didn't happen until they're stuck in horrendous New Year's Eve traffic at the choke point just outside Las Vegas, the Hoover Dam. Trapped in the car, like the 10 trillion gallons of water behind the dam, the pressure builds and builds until they can't take it anymore and they decide to get married in Vegas that night. Shenanigans ensue. They scramble to find a vacant hotel room on New Year's Eve, race to get a marriage license after hours, try to find wedding rings that fit, eat poison sushi in a shady casino, and they still have to get to the chapel on time.
See, when someone tells us a story, it's very different than when someone just gives us information. Science has shown that totally different parts of the brain light up. And if that story is told to a group of people, it literally puts everyone's brains in sync. Stories carry power. How do we know this? Well, as storytellers, we struggle with whether what we do has any true value. We're always asking ourselves what our contribution to the world is, as actors, writers, directors, producers. Is it escape? Entertainment? Sure. But we think there's more to it than that. In life, bubbles burst all the time. And when they do, we can find ourselves lost, confused, and unsure of how to deal with a sudden crisis or where to go from there. Don't you wish you had a map, some sort of guide to get you back on track and moving forward again? What if we told you that stories, books, TV, movies, theater hold a greater power than we often give them credit for? Have you ever heard the phrase, be the hero of your own story, but don't know how? What if we told you that the directions have been right under your nose your whole life in the form of stories? Which stories? Well, kind of all of them.
As storytellers and performers who have read and written thousands of scripts, we started to notice that stories are filled with these bursting moments. As a matter of fact, it's a necessary component to any good story. You don't generally read a lot of books or see movies about perfect people and their perfect lives. We wondered, could we use story structure to navigate crisis and to make changes in our lives? Well, stories have been told since the dawn of time to teach us valuable lessons, so is it really that far-fetched? I mean, us humans are still around and the mammoth isn't, so who's to say? We wondered, maybe the reason we respond to stories and why they keep getting told and retold is because that's just how life works. And just so you know, you're already the hero of your own story, even though you may not always feel like it.
Now, you may say, no, I'm no hero. Heroes slay dragons and save people from burning buildings and do other heroic stuff. Sure, some heroes do that. But what if we told you that to start your hero's journey, to take charge of your story, all you had to do was answer the call?
But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk a little bit about this magical roadmap, AKA story structure. Now, some of you who have studied literature, writing, or film may be acquainted with this, so bear with us. But we're going to try to break it down as simply as possible so you can start applying it to your life. 3-act structure. Most stories follow this structure. Act 1, setup. We meet our hero, set up the world, and establish the status quo. Act 2, conflict. Something threatens the status quo, and the hero goes on an adventure. We get what they call a rising action, then a falling action, which leads us to Act 3, resolution. The hero beats the villain and comes back to their life changed.
Now, as you movie buffs may know, it can be described a little like this. Exposition, again, who's our hero and where are they? Inciting incident, something crashes the party. Fun and games, the hero is off on an adventure. Low point, struggle, it ain't always easy. Low point. The hero, it looks like the hero is toast. Climax. There is a final fight, and the hero emerges victorious. Denouement. Basically what happens to the victorious hero after winning. And now for the more literary-minded and fans of myth and legend, the hero's journey. Basically, and we'll use a hopefully familiar story to illustrate, it goes like this.
Ordinary world, life before your bubble bursts. Call to adventure, your world is threatened. Refusal to call, you don't want to deal with it. Meeting the mentor, you seek help from someone wiser. Crossing the threshold, your adventure begins. Tests, allies, enemies, all the fun stuff. Approach the inmost cave, you start to face your fears. Ordeal, you conquer your fears.
Okay, you know what?
Level up,
That's way too much stuff to remember, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
If you're interested in this part, just look up Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces when you get home. In the meantime, we have cherry-picked all our favorite bits from all of those and put them together in a tidy little package you can take home and use yourself. Life story structure. Refuse the call, find the mentor, off to adventure, maybe with allies, overcome your fear and make a change.
That is so much simpler.
Yeah.
Basically, something shakes up your world, and you try to ignore it, but it throws you up against a big fear or weakness, and you may need a little help from an outside party to give you the confidence to take action, to accept the call. After that, you're off on your adventure. And it's not always easy, so maybe get some friends to help. And then once you've got that, it's just about building the confidence to overcome your fear.
See, what we're really doing when we apply this idea of story to a crisis situation is reframing. Reframing is a common psychological technique to allow someone to get distance from a charged emotional event and look at it in a different, more positive way. In my experience as a hypnotherapist, I learned that a useful therapeutic imagery method is to literally envision events in your life playing out as a movie on a screen in front of you. This cognitive restructuring allows you to get out of the emotion of it, to step back and clarify what you really want in order to deal with it and take action. A common example of this might be an athlete taking a loss and reframing it as a valuable learning experience. Or basically, is the glass half empty or is it half full?
Remember, you don't always have to look at crisis as a negative. It doesn't automatically have to be negative. Try to look at it instead as an opportunity with potentially complicated consequences. So, here's an example of how life story structure might run through another movie. Our first instinct was to go with another film like Raiders of the Lost Ark or The Matrix. Let's take a slightly different route this time. In Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Charlie gets the golden ticket, wants to sell it to provide for his family, but is convinced by his arguably not always great mentor, Grandpa Joe, to take the ride. Charlie's adventure in the Chocolate Factory is filled with fun and games and trials, and Charlie sacrifices what he thinks he wants and ends up getting what he really wants.
Now, we don't have time to try this out on every genre, but when you get home tonight, feel free to Google your favorite movie plus hero's journey. We bet you'll find most of them. Remember, these examples are not of great people with easy lives. They're about extraordinarily unique people, like you and me, overcoming difficulties. They inspire us to overcome challenges in our own lives and learn from the ways they persevere. And in certain stories, we learn what choices not to make. Don't go in that house, there's a killer in there. We love stories because they put us in a different mind frame. What would I do in that situation? But why wait for them to make a movie or write a book that deals with your specific crisis? Why not take it one step further, empower yourself, and look at your own life as a story?
Hold on, you say. If this is my story, where's the villain? Well, here's the thing. Even the villain in a story is not truly what the hero's trying to overcome. They're just a personified representation of the hero's greatest fear or weakness. So in a way, we're each the hero and the villain of our own story. The thing we need to overcome is usually a big part of us. For example, I struggle with body image issues, and Tara with envy and jealousy. They don't always wear a black hat and try to destroy the world every week, but they can be just as threatening. But this is reality. How do we use this map in our lives?
Well, first, what would it look like if it's not a famous movie? You remember that story we started with at the beginning about the road trip? Well, we cheated a little on that. As you probably guessed, that's actually our real life story. And now we're going to apply life story structure after the fact to that real world example. So Yuri proposing was the status quo bubble bursting. And then the week of us not talking about it was definitely refusing the call. Because it acted like the catalyst and forced us to answer the call, the Hoover Dam was our mentor. And then Vegas was the beginning of our adventure and team building. Wedding, food poisoning, relationship victories, and troubles, of which there were plenty, were the ups and downs we needed to experience in order to make the changes in ourselves that have helped keep our marriage together. And thus, the road trip story comes to an end. But then, the marriage becomes the new status quo. And then later, having a baby is a whole new bubble bursting.
Big bubble.
Big bubble.
Big bubble.
We would argue that throughout life, we're playing out both large and small-scale versions of the structure. It'll play out over your whole life, over a day in your life, and even a moment. A story fractal, if you will.
Okay, let's look at another real-life example we can run through this structure. Now, Tara recently wrote a young adult novel, and she's very passionate about it. But after asking for and receiving several critiques of the book, she's become paralyzed because she doesn't know how to fix the problems with the story. So, Tara, let's treat your crisis like a story and see where you may be on the timeline. Why is this a crisis?
Because it feels like the book isn't good enough, and I don't feel like I know what to do to fix it, and I feel stuck.
Well, were you excited about the book when you were writing it?
Of course, that's why I was writing it.
So why don't you just put it out there?
Because the feedback I got was that the book has some major issues.
Okay, well, what do you want?
I want to finish it. I want the book to be good. I want people to like it.
What are you afraid of?
Being a bad writer, not doing a good job, failing.
You want me to stop asking you questions now?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So we know that these are a lot of questions, but asking questions gets the mind going on answering them, even if we don't know what the answer is yet. Scientifically, this is known as instinctive elaboration. Basically, when faced with a question, the mind momentarily stops thinking about anything else and automatically addresses the question at hand. And this can be really good at getting you focused and coming up with a solution.
The refusal of the call in this instance is if you can't decide what to do next and instead choose not to move on. What are you afraid of? Why don't you want to move on? Identifying and figuring that out will identify the action you need to take and ultimately the change you need to make.
The hero refuses the call because they're getting shoved up against something uncomfortable. If the decision was easy, they wouldn't have any trouble with it. Now, you may be in a part of your life where you're just sailing and not pushing up against anything difficult at all. And you can just happily watch movies and read books about other people's trials and tribulations. But if you are bumping up against resistance, then that is where your story begins. In the case of my book, I'm having trouble moving forward and I don't know what to do. Maybe I need to find a mentor. And in this case, maybe my Yoda would be an editor to help guide me.
Whereas I would argue that she's already on her adventure. I mean, she wrote a whole novel, for Pete's sake. I mean, maybe it's time for her to put together a team that she can trust to help her get to the next step. See, she thinks she's at the stage where she needs a mentor. I think she's at the stage where she's off writing her adventure already. And here's the great thing. It doesn't matter if you correctly identify where you are in the structure, as long as it gets you thinking about how to move forward. Okay, let's look at one final example, because if stories have taught us anything, it's that things work best in threes. When we got the call to come and do a presentation at this conference, I immediately said yes, because who wouldn't? But as the reality started to set in, I was besieged by fear and doubt. Who are we to do a talk at a gathering like this, I thought. We'll never come up with a good idea. Soon became, oh no, people have already done a whole bunch of TED Talks on the things we want to talk about. Soon turned into, is it too late to back out? Was I refusing the call? I don't think so. I think I'd already said yes before I realized what I was getting myself into. But what kept me going then? The team that I had put together. Mostly, that was Tara, who is an unstoppable engine of finishing the things we start, but also our friends who listened to our ideas and who sat through rough drafts and gave us feedback. It can be hard to ask for help, but a hero rarely does it alone. And remember, once you're on your adventure, you can assemble a team to help you get what you want.
Okay, yeah. Now, in reality, let's be honest. When you're in crisis mode, you're not gonna wanna story your way out of anything. You're gonna wanna go and get a drink or eat some cake. Yeah. And that's okay. Remember, refusing the call is part of every great story. But eventually, it'll get old, and it won't get you out of the rut you're in. You might as well story on and take action. What's next? That depends. It's time to ask yourself the hard questions. What do I really want? What am I afraid of? What would The Rock do?
Whatever the crisis, internal or external, big or small, find the story of it. Decide where you are in the arc of that story, and then really imagine yourself for a minute in that movie or that book. And don't worry about making the right choice, because, and here, hopefully this will help put your mind at ease, there is no right choice. It's all about taking action. So I guess that makes every hero an action hero. Hopefully, this approach will help take the pressure off you feeling like you immediately have to solve a crisis. You could just hammer away at the problem, or you could let the solution take you by surprise, the way it would in any good story. So go ahead, have fun. Make it fun. What's your favorite kind of story? Mystery, romance, action, horror? Pick a genre and get yourself motivated by playing out your crisis through that lens.
Okay, so let's recap. You realize you're struggling because something challenged your status quo. Time to figure out what you want, and maybe you need a little help with that. So don't be afraid to get yourself a mentor. Then it's time to act, and you are off to adventure, alone or with friends. You'll succeed and fail over and over again. We could do a whole other talk on why failure is the fastest way to succeed. Yeah. And you will repeat this cycle until you build the confidence to make that change and get on living your life. And then something else will go sideways, and you'll have to do it all over again, and again, and again if you're lucky. Remember, as much as we lust after them, perfect lives are boring. Dive into the conflict. Go on an adventure. You're a hero. That's what heroes do.
And let's be clear, you don't have to apply this to everything in your life. You just need to haul it out when you're feeling a little stuck and you need some help getting back on track. After that pint of ice cream, of course. So that's the plan. You're already the hero. You just have to answer the call. Now go live your life story. Thank you. Okay.